My guest today is Sam Nasr. Sam, how are you today?
Very good, David. How are you?
Doing great. It's great to have you back on the show. Tell us, remind us, what do you do for a living?
So I'm a software developer, excuse me, as well as a trainer, all within the Microsoft space.
Yeah, and you're also a frequent speaker and a big community guy running user groups
Very
in the
much so. I
Cleveland
run two user
area.
groups in the Cleveland area. Also a frequent conference speaker. You and I were both at KCDC recently, which was a
Great
great
show.
conference. And then also applied to CodeMash, and hopefully
Me
I'll see
too.
you there.
I hope so. I got my fingers crossed. So, tell me some of the things you're talking about these days.
So lately, data cleansing has been the big topic, which is something that's overlooked often when it comes to machine learning. And so I wanted to kind of shine the light on it a little bit, and not just the data cleansing portion, not just the technical portion, but look at it from a non-technical perspective as well, meaning
Great.
how the data was collected, if the user was influenced, that sort of thing.
Okay, well,
And then in addition,
let's define data cleansing first.
sure. So data cleansing is essentially cleaning up the data so that way you're avoiding garbage in, garbage out when it comes to machine learning. You're avoiding biases, and it is the most time-consuming task when it comes to machine learning, but it's also the most valuable because it's the foundation for machine learning.
Okay.
So we're talking about things such as data structures, the values that were going to be incorporated for the machine learning. And then, of course, how the data was collected, like I mentioned.
All right. And why is this important? Why is that the most important yet most time-consuming part of machine learning?
Well, because it goes through a lot of scrubbing, and depending on whether the data was entered manually or more through on an automated process, that will influence how much time we have to spend on the cleansing process. And the cleansing itself is important because, like I said, that's what we're building our machine learning algorithm on. And so, just like everything else, if you start with a bad foundation, you're going to end up with a bad product.
Garbage in, garbage out. Exactly.
Exactly.
Data cleansing implies that the data is somehow dirty in some way. Can you give me some examples of what bad data that needs cleansing would look like?
So, in my opinion, you should always treat all data as bad data. It has to go through the cleansing process, some validation, and some checks, and to make sure that it fits what you're looking for. So you want to do things like normalization, make sure that the structure is normalized. You want to validate the values that are entered. And you want to, of course, handle missing values, which is a big thing. And there's multiple ways of handling missing values. And then, of course, removing duplicate data dependent on which columns you're going to be using for the machine learning process. So
Okay.
it's kind of a long, intricate process. But more importantly, what I like to do is shine the light on how the data was collected firsthand.
Okay.
So, like I said, you need to pay attention to whether the data was manually entered or whether it was an automated process. A lot of times, clients will use Excel or a spreadsheet just to enter data, and they consider that to be their enterprise solution, and this is what we're going to run with. And of course, Excel is a great Swiss Army knife. The problem is because of its ability to enter in anything, naturally, the users could enter in anything. So we have to if we're working with a spreadsheet like that, we would have to cleanse it. But also, even if we're working with a database, you have to look at things like what influenced the users to enter the values that they entered. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was heading up several groups, volunteer groups, and we gave them several buckets where they can basically volunteer for action-based services or volunteer in the IT group or volunteer for other services. And we said, put your name in the hat whatever bucket you're interested in, and we're going to have an Amazon gift card as a prize drawing. So naturally, what everyone did was enter their name in all the buckets,
Of
and
course.
then in the end, when we went to call them, no one expressed any interest in anything. So the fact that we were trying to entice them to enter their name in by using a gift card, that just forced them to, put their name in everything when in fact they really didn't mean to or didn't want to.
They were gaming the system, so that
Right.
it didn't capture the information you were hoping to capture.
Exactly. Another thing is, for example, let's say you're asking someone for a review. If you're standing over their shoulder, that's essentially like forcing them to give you a 5-star review or a positive review as opposed to an honest review, right?
Right.
So once again, how the data is collected is critical.
Oh, so that's you can correct that before, like have them give a review with you outside of the room, or remove that incentive or change the incentive. But once the data's there and you know it's biased, how do you cleanse it?
Well, if you know it's biased, then you know, the question would be how many rows do I have that are considered biased in
I
comparison
see.
to the data set at large? And if it's not too many, or if I can identify which records are going to be biased, I can just simply throw those out from the machine learning process. But you always need to find out how the data was collected, work with a subject matter expert as well to find out how that data got there. And then more importantly, the SME will also help define what is our overall objective statement. What is it that we're trying to do with this machine learning model? Are we
Wow.
trying to find variations in the user input? Are we trying to find to predict values of an outcome? What is it that we're trying to do as a whole?
So identifying what those potential biases are is key, so we can know which ones we can keep and which ones maybe we
Absolutely.
start throwing away. Let's talk about missing values. That's always a challenge. What are our options if we know some of this data has missing information?
So actually, there's several options. First is reverse engineering, where you can kind of guesstimate and what the possible value could be. The example I like to give, if you see just the first name field filled in and the last name is missing for a particular user, but you know that, let's say, for example, you have a Sam, but the last name is missing, but he works in development. Well, if we look at or in the engineering department, for example, well, if we look at the engineering department, we know that we only have one Sam,
Right.
right? And so it can easily fill in and reverse engineer that field. Other things are not so easy, but there's a lot of mathematical libraries out there that come to our aid. So you can utilize things like MICE, which is multiple imputation by chained equations. Rolls off the
Big
tongue very
words.
easily. So this is one algorithm that utilizes linear algebra. And what it's doing is it's essentially looking at all the values and it's guesstimating what that missing value would be. And then it runs through multiple iterations by using other columns. And so that's where you get the multiple imputation by chained equations. It's a reiterative process and it works pretty well. The nice thing about it, especially if you're using Python, it's nothing more than an API call.
And that's
So
only
it
for
comes in handy.
numeric data, just to be clear.
I'm sorry?
That's only for numeric data, correct?
For numeric data, correct. Yeah. And then you also have PCA, or principal component analysis, and its counterpart, probabilistic principal component analysis, or PPCA. And these also are methods for evaluating the missing values and can fill in those values as well. So you can go about it in a very technical route or through just simple reverse engineering. There's also other aspects where you can look at replacing it with a mean, median, or mode, and these are different types of averages, and just essentially run through multiple iterations of your model and see which one performs best.
Okay. Yeah. So just replace it with a reasonable value that's easily calculated.
That's one option. And again, there's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts that go around this. One simple solution, just simply remove the row that has the missing data. But then it begs the question, well, how many rows am I removing from how big my overall data set is?
Sure. One of the challenges I think with machine learning is you often get data from different sources. And some of those sources are just simply not collecting a column information. Well, if you remove all of those, you're essentially removing an entire source of data, which would probably skew your results.
Absolutely. But again, it depends. I hate to use that phrase
You
because
probably
there's
use it a
developers
lot
who
as
use
a
that all the
consultant.
time. But it really does depend. It's a very tough course to maneuver depending on your own situation.
And you mentioned duplicate data. This is something that when I was doing a lot of list management and an earlier job, I had a challenge with this because I might, for example, have Sam Nasr in there 3 times, and maybe I've got 3 different phone numbers or 3 different addresses. They're not exact duplicates. Or maybe I've got, Sam Nasr and Samuel Nasr and Samadeep Nasr, and they may or may not be the same person. So a duplication is just a matter of exact duplication. How do you deal with these
And it
guys?
would also depend on which columns that you're trying to train the machine on. For example,
Right.
am I trying to predict who that user is, or am I trying to predict the purchases that they made? So, for example, Sam Nasser may have purchased the same item multiple times, and so that's obviously legitimate data.
Right.
But in some cases where I am, depending on the columns that I'm using, I may end up with duplicate data, which essentially would force a bias into the model in the end.
Are there other kinds of data? We covered the missing values. We covered the duplicates. We covered biased data. Is there anything else we're
So
missing?
validation also,
Okay.
even though things may be in a structured database, again, depending on the application, you'd want to validate and ensure that the application recorded those values correctly. So, for example, you would not want to have a medical procedure that's done solely for females to be, executed or performed on a male. Obviously, that's not going to be
Okay.
valid. You want to do other validations as well, like if you have from selecting from a set of values, you want to make sure that you don't have an outlier, something that's not within that list of values. So there's various forms of validation to also go about the data as well.
Okay. Yeah. And you mentioned having validating data. Sometimes the data itself can be entered correctly, but it can be biased. It could be, for example, capturing engineering information only from men. It's a classic case.
Right,
And therefore, your machine learning algorithm may assume that all engineers are men, or men are better suited for engineering, which
right.
is a foolish assumption. But if the data suggests that, then we've got a problem. Is this part of data cleansing? Do we need to consider that?
Absolutely. And that's where working with a subject matter expert can help identify which columns to use and to ensure that we have the correct data sets.
Okay, so these are the types of data that we can, or bad data, I shouldn't say bad data that needs cleansing that we can do. And these are some of the ways that we can address that. Is there a step beyond that?
So essentially, just running through that process, and there's a lot more to it than that. As far as the items that I mentioned, we touched on it from a superficial standpoint, but once you dig deeper, there's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts to maneuver and identify those. But in a nutshell, it's essentially those items that you had mentioned.
All right. Are there any tools that you use to help this process?
Plenty. So there are some great tools that are available for everyone. Excel, like I said, is a great Swiss Army knife. It's a great way to plot the data set and
Okay.
immediately identify outliers through its graphing functionality. You can also use SSMS to identify the mins and the max within a data set. There's also some other tools available through SQL Server to help cleanse the data for machine learning. And of course, Python libraries are a great resource. And then, of course, there's another plethora of third-party products out there on the market as well.
Awesome. I think you do a lot of machine learning in your job, right?
Correct.
What can you give me an estimate about how much time is spent in the data cleansing aspect of this? Is it 25%, 50%, 75%? Just
I'll give you the ubiquitous developer answer. It depends.
it depends. Okay.
So, it depends on where the data is coming from,
Okay.
how dirty it is, so to speak, to start with, or how clean it is. And, whether you have access to a subject matter expert that you can rely on to identify the columns and the values that you're looking for. So it depends. But it is the most time consuming part in preparing the data. Everything that I mention is basically the building blocks for creating a data cleaning pipeline. Essentially, this is going to be more automated, but those building blocks is what takes time to actually prepare those items. And then once you have it more automated, obviously, it kind of takes care of itself. It's less time consuming at that point.
I think comes as a surprise to a lot of people that first get into machine learning. They think they're going to spend their time doing predictive analysis and building models and working with statistical data, but they end up spending their time scouring the data and finding out where are the duplicates and where's the missing fields and where are the data and how do I correct that. I
Yeah,
think that
exactly.
people don't expect that when they get into this field.
And you touched on an important point. A lot of times, like as developers, when we're giving a new project, we immediately just want to dive right in.
Right.
And machine learning is no different. The problem is we don't sit down to identify what the business is, what's actually happening with the user end, and how the data is collected. So all these things, we want to find out how the business functions in order to better understand how the data is collected, and then how we eventually can work with the data cleansing process and get that to a final model.
Yeah, I like what you said at the very beginning. You said always assume that the data needs to be clean. Don't assume that it's clean
Absolutely.
data when it comes in.
Right.
Is there anything we haven't talked about that you feel is critical on this topic?
I think we covered most of it actually. I mean, there's again a lot of little nuances, like the you want to check for formatting and spell checks. When I mentioned remove duplicates, you essentially want to do that after as your last step, because as you're trimming the data and removing the formatting and changing the case, that's where you might reveal duplicates at that last step, and that's when you want to remove the duplicates at that point.
Okay. Do you have any? I know we're at the end of the conference season. I thought now. Do you have anything lined up? Any public speaking coming up?
In the immediate future, no. But who knows when I'll be getting a "you've been selected" type of
Yeah, I'm in the
email.
same boat
So
myself. I'm waiting to hear
yeah,
from a couple places, and I hope to cross paths with you at one of those soon. Sam, thank you so much for your time. This has been educational.
my pleasure, David, and I look forward to seeing you at the next conference. If you work in technology, we should be friends.